If you ask anyone to tell you what moment comes to mind when they think of Luke Skywalker, chances are they're going to pick this one. Arguably Luke's most iconic moment, this scene perfectly displays and cements his character, bringing us to the close of his arc that we followed throughout the course of the original trilogy. Not only that, in universe, this moment is also gargantuan in its importance. This is the moment that Luke Skywalker finally became a Jedi Knight. Return of the Jedi is not only the finale of the original Star Wars trilogy, it's also the end of Luke Skywalker's story as he goes on the traditional hero's journey. Mark Hamill even compared the story to showing the audience how James Bond got his license to kill. That's because Luke doesn't become a Jedi until the climax of the third film, and we follow him the entire way. But before we touch more on that specific moment, it's important to have an understanding of Luke's journey and what the central idea of Return of the Jedi is. One thing that symbolizes Luke's progression through his struggles and conflicts is, surprisingly and simply enough, his clothing. In the book The Star Wars Archives Volume 1, George Lucas explained how the colors of the world of Star Wars work, and how they specifically relate to Luke. George said, "The color was developed before Star Wars, when I was laying out the art direction, and so I just continued them throughout the other movies. When you're in the technical world, it's black and white. When you're in the organic world, it's sort of green and brown. One represents the dark side of the Force, the other represents the light side. Even more than that, the brown world represents human interaction, your psyche. The other represents machines, which means robots." Of course, Luke is coming out of the organic world, which is sand dunes, and he's moving into the technical world. He's sort of brown in a black and white world. As he goes on through the story, ultimately to confronting Vader, he's become, I wouldn't say a modern man, but a machine-oriented person as opposed to an organic person. To put it simply, based on what George said, the stages of Luke's progression through both the story of the trilogy and through the Force itself are symbolized in his clothing. In the first film, we're introduced to Luke in an all-white outfit, a young, idealistic farm boy that knows nothing of the world beyond the horizon of Tatooine. He knows nothing of the Force or the Jedi and the Sith. His white clothing represents that purity, that innocent ignorance he held before, in the words of Obi-Wan, taking his first steps into a larger world. By the events of The Empire Strikes Back, chronologically 3 years later, Luke's world is flipped upside down, figuratively and literally. As the world around him gets darker, with the Empire tightening its grip on the fragmented Rebel Alliance and the uncertain weight of his destiny resting on Luke's shoulders as he learns more of the Force, his clothing gets darker as well. He spends the latter portion of the film wearing a grayish tan jumpsuit, which gets progressively dirtier and damaged during his confrontation with Darth Vader on Cloud City. Empire specifically does a great job of making the world of Star Wars murkier, almost polluted, as the story creates tension and uncertainty about where Luke's journey could take him. George Lucas purposefully included Yoda's line about another last hope for the galaxy to suggest to the audience that Luke could be killed by the end of the film. When you think about Luke's actions during Empire, that doesn't seem too implausible, given that his impulsiveness and poor decisions continuously cause him to fail throughout the entire thing. In short, Luke's gray clothing embodies all of that dark uncertainty throughout Empire. As he grows stronger in the Force and trains with Yoda, he also steps ever closer to the dark side, which is what's perfectly portrayed when we next find him in Return of the Jedi. In the same book, The Star Wars Archives Volume 1, George explained that he decided to dress Luke in black for the third film not only to symbolize where he stood in his journey, but so that he would simply look like Darth Vader. But Luke doesn't only look like Darth Vader when we see him ominously enter Jabba's palace. He acts like Vader too, subtly choking the guards and delivering some threatening lines across the next several scenes. This is all completely intentional. The crux of Luke's situation in Return of the Jedi is him confronting and dealing with the dark side of the Force, first and foremost within himself, which is why he wears black. Thus, you can see the gradual degrading of Luke's clothing as he progresses in his journey with the Force, from white to gray to black. As with Empire's uncertainty about whether Luke would survive, Jedi questions whether or not Luke will remain good or turn to the dark side at the end. The latter alternative was something considered by George and even advocated for by Mark Hamill. The possibility of Luke following his father's dark footsteps was even foreshadowed in Empire. His black outfit, his slightly arrogant remarks about his power, and his violent threats to Jabba all seem to suggest that Luke is even closer to becoming Vader than we ever thought he could be. The concept of becoming Vader is absolutely central to the moment where Luke finds himself pushed into a rage he cannot control aboard the second Death Star. Goaded into a frenzy by Vader and motivated by his desire to protect Leia, Luke truly unleashes his anger for the first time, seemingly giving into the dark side. While he is still essentially staying true to his character by trying to protect Leia, he's doing it in the wrong way, giving into anger and hatred, playing right into the Emperor's hands as he nearly makes the same mistakes his father did. As Luke stood over Vader, the battered Sith Lord at his mercy, he found himself in the same situation that his father had been in, with Count Dooku at his mercy. The only difference is, Anakin said yes, and Luke says no. Looking down at Vader, Luke realizes the trap he has nearly fallen into, walking the same evil path that his father had and making the same mistakes. A possible fate that he had seen before in the Cave of Evil. Luke realizes then that by destroying Vader, he would become Vader. With that realization, he chooses to implement the Jedi teachings, fulfilling Yoda's decree that facing Vader again would be the final trial of his training. Displaying the optimism and compassion central to his character, Luke decides to spare his father's life and discards his lightsaber, perfectly embodying Yoda's lesson that a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. In front of his mortal enemy, the reigning Sith Master in Darth Bane's line of Dark Lords, Luke Skywalker surrendered to the will of the Force, refusing to fight out of anger or hatred, refusing the dark side, refusing the machinations of the Sith. He decided to be a peacekeeper, a servant of the light, a Jedi Knight. Over the course of the movie, Luke's friends and even his masters had refused to grant him the title of Jedi Knight. Han accused him of suffering delusions of grandeur, and Yoda reminded him that even though his training was complete, he would not be a Jedi until he confronted Darth Vader again. In the moment that Luke refused to take his father's life, it was the Emperor, a Sith Lord, that finally granted him the title, cementing that as the moment that Luke Skywalker finally became a Jedi.
So be it, Jedi.
To further hammer in this point, returning to the symbolism of his clothing in his journey, the flap of Luke's tunic comes loose, opening to reveal white underneath. This was intentional, as it was meant to symbolize that the light was always inside of him. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video essay. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it, and may the Force be with you.